Stitch Cuties, I'm Brittany with Stitches of Love Quilting, and welcome to the video tutorial for making your first block of your Garden Moments quilt using your sewing machine. So the first block is super cute. It is the little bird with a whole bunch of flowers, and there's two little bumblebees flying. So in this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set up your binder your first month. I'm going to show you how to prepare your pre-fused laser cut applique pieces, and we will build the applique units in this video. And then you're going to be ready to start sewing and use your pattern to guide you through sewing the beautiful colors of the applique around your pieces. So let's get started. The first thing you'll notice in your box, you get a lot of papers in your first box. So you have your binder cover, you have the back cover, you have the binder edge, and then of course you have a full pattern. So what you're going to want to do is get a 1-inch binder. This is just a regular binder that you can find at any office store. And what we're going to do is put our cover in it. So this binder doesn't come in your box, just all the papers for it come in your box. So you'll notice that your pattern pieces have 3 holes punched into it. And every month you're going to get a 3-hole punch pattern. You're going to be able to put it in this binder, and you're going to have a beautiful block of the month book at the end of your program. And then this is the back cover, some highlights of the quilt, super cute. And remember the fun little freebie pin cushion you made at the beginning? Super cute. So we're just gonna put this in. And then for the binder edge, you'll see that it's on one full-size piece of paper. I've cut one edge. Now you're simply going to cut the second edge. You can use your rotary cutter, of course, to just cut up the edge, or you can use your scissors. Don't tell anyone I'm using my fabric scissors on paper. This is essentially a cardinal sin, so I apologize that I do it on camera, but my rotary cutter isn't right beside me, and my scissors are, so alas. Okay, and put your paper aside. Now, a trick for putting the binder edge, you're gonna wanna lay this flat and then put it in. If you try and put the binder edge in while it's closed, it's gonna be just really not fun. So this is very easy to just slip right in when it's laying flat like this. And then, ta-da, look how cute your little binder is. This also is a great way for you to stay organized throughout the entire block of the month and know where everything is. So now we're gonna put our big pattern in here. You're gonna get a new pattern every single month, but your block 1 pattern has a little bit more in it. And I just wanna review what's in it so that you know you can always come back and look at this. So in here we have, of course, this cute cover, your cute little gardener right front and center. You'll see that it notates that it's Sewing Machine Applique for you. Inside, you have a lot of information. So you have an outline of what you're gonna receive in your boxes every single month. You have FAQs, meaning how do you sign in your account? Where are the video tutorials? Obviously, you're watching these, so you found them. But if you need to change your address or your payment information, all of that information is here, along with how to access our amazing customer support team. The ladies are just beyond fantastic. So if you need anything, reach out to us and we're happy to help. Then we go through a list of recommended notions. So I'll go through that in this video. I'll basically be using most of them. And it also, of course, reminds you that we do have 30 weight and 50 weight thread kits made specifically for this block of the month. Now, because you're using your sewing machine to do this, we then have an outline of what type of steps you're gonna complete every single month. So again, a review of your favorite notions, and then it's gonna go through setting up your workspace, how to identify and number each piece, the method of creating applique units. So you can always refer back to this front little section anytime throughout the block of the month, just general information. Then when you turn your next page, you'll see this is the start of our first pattern. So you can see it notates that it's block 1, and look how cute this is. It's what we're gonna make today in the video. We're gonna make the applique units, iron it on, and then you'll be off and running to sew. So inside, it will walk you through all of the steps, and you'll see that it outlines what applique units you're gonna build. So very, very helpful. And we also show you your stitch order, so you know the thread colors that you need for this particular month, and it shows you what number of pieces and what order to stitch them in. Of course, you can do it differently, but this is an optimized way for doing the project. So you'll also have a full-size placement guide, which we are going to use in this video quite a bit, so I'm going to go on and get it out. And then I'm going to set my little notebook aside. I'm going to talk about the notions real fast so that you have that information. I'll come back this way. So I like to use what I call the perfect stack. So I have my Steady Betty. It is 13 by 17. You'll see if you've been in some of our block of the months, there was a 12 by 18 size. Steady Betty essentially just resized their Steady Betty sizes. So 12 by 18 or 13 by 17 works the same in your perfect stack. And this is great. What I really love is that after I build my applique units and I come back, I iron my final like good press on my applique pieces on my Steady Betty, as well as ironing my fabric and things like that I do with my Steady Betty. Underneath that, you will see in my pile, I have my fusing mat sitting right on top of my applique glass mat, which is right on top of my Premium Glow light pad. This is everything for applique. It makes your life so easy. So your light pad has 3 different levels of light, very helpful. I typically just use the brightest. Your applique glass mat allows you to iron your applique units that you're building with your on top of your fusing mat without having to move over to your Steady Betty until that final press. You cannot iron directly on top of your light pad, right? So this glass can withstand up to 400 degrees heat. So in using your little steam fast travel iron to build your applique units, it can definitely withstand that little amount of heat, no problem, without affecting your light pad. And then you'll see in the video building applique units. To me, the best thing about building an applique unit is that if you're gonna make a mistake, you make the mistake here while it's still correctable and fixable before you're on your final fabric. So it just really allows for more accuracy in your project. So in your box, you have your background fabric. I recommend that you starch it and then press it. I like to use the same amount of starch throughout the project. So what I do, and I'm not doing it in this video, but please do as I say, not as I do. I like to actually starch my fabric until it's wet, and you can either let it dry on its own and then give it a little bit of starch again and then press it, or just press it until it's pretty much wet with the starch and iron it dry. And what that does is just give some firmness to your fabric. And you want to, however you do it now in this month, you want to do it throughout the entire process because it does make it easier if your project is done the same way throughout. Another tip, I don't have a ruler, here's a ruler. I like to use the same ruler or same brand of rulers throughout a project so you can make a little note in your binder notebook and just say, hey, I'm using my Omni Grips or whatever ruler brand you happen to be using. I think that makes a difference. It's kind of nitpicky, but you know, why not be accurate? Also in your kit, you have all your pre-fused laser cut applique pieces. So what we're gonna do now is organize them. So you can see that all of your pieces are all the way cut out, except for just a little bitty snip that you need to do. Before you free them from the rectangle or square that they are in, I recommend that you plop them down on top of your reverse applique piece page and number them. So you can see that this is the same as this. Now we do scrunch them a little bit for the laser so it's not gonna lay on it exactly, but they're in the same order. Another thing that I've done in this pattern, all of these flowers are the exact same flower, which is very nice and easy. However, the way they are on the placement guide, they're turned a different direction. So while these are all the same flowers, they're turned different ways. So what I did for you on this reverse applique piece is I made sure that the up is always facing up here. So what you can do for yourself is give yourself just a little arrow up all the way across. So that way when you're building your unit, you'll see this. It's gonna just make life a lot easier. I don't think you need to do that on any of the other pieces on this project, but for the flowers throughout this entire quilt, we're gonna do that. It's just gonna make your life easier, I promise. So same thing for all of our green leaves, the stems. The bird I went on and numbered even though he's pretty self-explanatory. You have your 2 bumblebee bodies. They are slightly different, so make sure you put this going the right way, right? You wanna make sure you have it facing the right way. You have the little bee wings, you have the stripes on your bumblebee, and then you have your circles. Now on these, you don't necessarily need to number. It's all the exact same circle. Direction of them doesn't matter, but why not? I numbered everything else. I might as well number this. So now what we're gonna do, take your Karen K Buckley scissors. This is the large pair. My favorite size is the medium, and then also the small is really nice to have on hand. And all you're gonna do is simply snip your pieces free. So just snip, snip, easy, easy, easy. Only takes a second, and then you have all of your pre-fused laser cut applique pieces ready to go. And in this month, there are 45 pieces. So aren't you so glad that you didn't have to trace and cut all of those? Now, if you want to make another quilt, of course, because you have these pieces reversed right here in front of you, you can easily trace them onto Heat and Bond Light or your fusible of choice, pick your fabric and cut it out again. But of course, the benefit of this block of the month is that we did all of that for you. It just saves a ton of time. So what I'm going to do is go on and free all of my pieces, and we'll be back in just a second to get started on building our applique units. Now we're on step 4 of our pattern, and we are going to mark the accent lines on our applique pieces of all of our leaves. And then we're going to do step 5 where we mark the eyeball location for our bird and our 2 bumblebees. So what I've done, I have all my leaves right here, and I'm just simply going to put it down in place. And I have my placement guide right over my light pad, and it doesn't need to be under your fusing mat yet, because right now we're just marking the lines. And you take your Sew Line chalk pencil and you're gonna mark that line. Let me hold this up so you can see what that looks like. See how you have just one accent line drawn on it? We're going to do that for all of our pieces. And this is so when we are doing our stitching, one, you won't forget to do your accent line stitching, and it makes it really easy because if you are maybe not comfortable just like guiding your machine to do an accent line, this will be easy for you just to stitch right over it. And so just put it right in place. Make sure you turn your leaf the right way. They are directional. And so you're just gonna mark your lines on all of your leaves. So I'll do one more and then I'll do that off camera. So you continue marking all of your leaves. There we go. Easy peasy, right? So they all just have their easy accent line. Now I'm using my Sew Line chalk pencil. You can also use a micron Pigma pen when you're doing your accent lines. We're using a pretty light green, the 1177 avocado, so I prefer the Sew Line to cover that up. And then when we're marking our quilting later, if you're gonna do the quilt as you go method, I like using my Sew Line just because it's a little harder to aim correctly and cover up that Pigma pen. So now we have our 2 little bees that we're gonna put in place and mark their little eyeballs. So just a little dot right there. And then for number 11, a little dot just like so. And the location, oops, my elbow hit the thing. The location of our eyeball here. Make sure I see, yeah, right there. Just making sure I'll see in the right spot. There we go, a little notation for where we're gonna put our French knots for our little eyeballs. So continue marking all of your leaves, and then in just a moment, we'll start laying out the order of our applique units. Now in your pattern, you are going to put together little piles in numerical order of your unit 1, 1 through 3, unit 2, 4 through 8, unit 3, 9 through 13, unit 4, which is 14 through 27, and unit 5, 28 through 45. So go on and make a cute little pile of your pieces, just like so for each section. And then what we're gonna do is build that unit. So you can see I've made cute little piles of all my pieces. And what we're gonna do is work through building our unit. So what I have in front of me, I have my placement guide is now underneath my fusing mat, but it's on top of my glass mat and on top of my light pad. And you're simply going to build your unit on your fusing mat. So as you grab each piece, simply peel the backing from it, and you're going to put each piece in place, and we're going to build an applique unit, and we're simply gonna press where the units overlap. And this just makes it so that when we go to put this on our fabric, it's much easier to do so in sections instead of trying to put everything down or build it directly on the fabric. Because again, if we're gonna make a mistake with like any of these flowers, it's better to make it here where we can reheat it and move the piece versus ironing them all together on the fabric and realizing we've messed up. And so now we're gonna put piece number 3, the little bird wing, in place, and just make sure you get it right in the lines of your placement guide. And now I'm just simply gonna iron for just a second right over it. So now that is stuck together. We're just gonna leave it there to cool. You don't wanna burn your fingers. We're gonna move over now to, let's see, pieces 4 through 8, which is applique unit 2, our little bumblebee. So I'm gonna grab my pieces and begin putting them down. Now remember, we have them all labeled, so it's very easy to put them in place. So number 4, number 5. And you wanna make sure you turn your little wings the right way. They're not symmetrical. And then we're gonna put down piece number 6, which is our little bee body. And remember, it's got its little eyeball marked. So do make sure your eyeball still lines up when you put your piece in place. I'm gonna give this just a little tap to make sure those wings don't move. And now we have our 2 stripes, number 7 and 8. So just put these right in place. And you'll notice the top and bottom of your stripe lines up perfectly with the body of your bumblebee. Nice and easy. And then our piece number 8. Beautiful. Now, if you want to be careful and not burn your fingers, I do recommend this Alex Anderson tool. Can help put your piece in place. And when you take this wooden lid off, there is a stiletto there, which is also very helpful. So now we are on to step 8. We're going to build our second bumblebee, which is pieces 9 through 13. So I'm just going to reach and grab those. So you can see how nice it is to have them pre-piled in numerical order. And so it just makes your life easier as you're building your units. So what's great about this kit is it's pre-cut for you. We've told you some tricks with labeling. So really, once you get your kit and build your applique units, you're ready for the fun part of sewing in really no time at all. It's really a time saver to get these kits. And for me, once you get them, it's hard to do it any other way but to have the kit. I love kits. There we go. Oh, let me bring that up just a little. Make sure you're in your lines. And you can see, I mean, they barely overlap, so you're gonna wanna be gentle with this unit. But again, much easier than trying to do this right on your fabric and not get anything out of place. So 1 stripe. Let's see if I can be brave and put down 2 stripes at one time. We'll see. There we go. And our second little stripe. And with your iron, you always want to go straight down. You don't want to drag your iron because that can move your applique pieces. So I'm just going to let those chill there. Let's see if our bird is cooled off. Yes, it is. Basically, you just let it cool off so it doesn't hurt your fingers to touch. So now there's 1 perfect bird unit. And I will see if this little bumblebee is ready. Yep. This is our second bumblebee. And then let's see, this guy. He's a little warm still, but I think I can gently pull him up. Look at that. So cute. Our third little unit. So now we have quite a few pieces in this unit. We are going to build 14 through 27. So we are basically building this little section of flowers and leaves. So again, I have my pieces in numerical order right here, and we're gonna just begin putting them in place with number 14. A tip for getting your fusible off the back, just simply put it fabric side up, and then on the edge, crimp it, just like so, and that white paper just pops right off. There you go, easy peasy. And this piece is gonna go into your seam allowance. You'll notice on your pattern, let me show you real fast. You have your outer line, which is your trim line at 7.5 inches. And then this inside line is a guide for where you're gonna put your fusible batting if you're quilting as you go. And it's also a guide for where your seam is gonna go when you piece it together. You're not gonna actually use this guide when you're piecing. It's just a visual representation so you know your pieces are in the right spot and will be perfectly set where they need to be in relation to that seam allowance. So now we have piece number 15. Let me get that a little straighter. And number 16, I don't really have much overlap yet, so I'm waiting to iron until I have a few more pieces. Plus you'll notice that this fusing mat has like a tacky texture to it, which is very helpful. There we go. And now comes the flowers. Remember these funny little arrows we put on? This is where you're gonna be so grateful for them. So I have my arrow facing up. I'm gonna simply flip it immediately so my arrow is still facing up. Give it a crimp, pull the fabric off while keeping it in that direction. And then when I go right here, it's gonna be the perfect direction so that I don't have to turn this, say 7 or 8 times to get it into the right spot. So convenient, right? Yes, it is. And then our flower center right in the center. Now I have quite a few amount of pieces down. I'm gonna give it quick press where they all overlap. Now when we're building the unit, it's gonna feel a little weird. We're gonna jump over here to this sort of middle section and start building a little bit here and then our flower, right? And that's because we're always going from the lowest piece up. And sometimes that means you jump over a little bit and then you put a piece on that connects those two, like a little bridge. And in our case, the little flower is the bridge between these units. So piece number 19, right in place like so. And now again, we have a flower. So arrow up, flip it. And it just helps not having to spin this flower and get it in the right spot. There we go. Of course, I kind of turned it a little as I was putting it down, didn't I? And then we're gonna put our flower center and then I'll give this a press, just like so. And again, it only takes a few seconds. You're gonna do your final pressing of all these units once it's on your background fabric. So now we have our 2 leaves, number 22 and number 23. We've already got the accent lines marked. There we go, like so. And then right here, number 23. There we go. And now I'm gonna give that a press where they overlap on that stem and on each other. Now we are doing another flower, number 24. So arrow up, flip it over. Don't you love those arrows? I know. Try and do it without the arrows. You're gonna be spinning them. It's gonna drive you crazy. And we don't want that. No driving up the crazy. We want it to be fun and easy. Now these flower centers, I am looking at the placement guide, but if you get the flower center off a little bit, it's no big deal. So number 26, arrow up, flip it over, whoop, remove that white backing, and it's gonna go perfectly in place like so. You wanna be careful not to twist your arm too much when you're doing it or you will move your piece, like I did right there. There we go. Now it's in place. And our flower center. So this is going to be considered unit 4, and that's just because we could build one giant unit, but it's a little easier to work with smaller chunks. And give this a press. So while that's cooling, I am going to move my placement guide and my fusing mat so that I can now build out number 28 through 45. So grab my little pile of pieces and you know the drill. We're gonna start with number 28 and breeze through this unit. So in just a few minutes, we'll be putting this on our fabric. Easy peasy. So number 28. Try and go a little faster for you. I like to, especially on the first or second block, give a ton of details in the tutorial because for some of you, this is your very first time doing applique, and I applaud you. You're gonna become addicted. It's so much fun. A lot of people, for some reason, are scared of applique and think it's really hard, but honestly, I think it's much more forgiving and easier than any kind of piecing or anything like that. So now I'm gonna give these all a little press together. And now we're on number 32. So we have another little instance where we jump a little bit. So again, arrow up, flip it, and the piece goes right in place right here. There we go, kind of wiggling, aren't I? and our flower center. Now we're gonna do piece number 34 is our next flower, and that's gonna connect our stems in this flower unit. So again, get your arrow, flip it over, try not to wiggle it, and put it right in place. He needs to come this way just a hair. There we go. You want to make sure that it is overlapping. If you put it down, it's not overlapping, then you know you don't quite have it in the right spot on your placement guide. So now give these a press. And now we're on to piece number 36, which is right here. This little piece doesn't quite touch that flower. But don't worry, the next flower will connect them. So they're gonna be right next to each other, these two. There we go. Your flower center. Isn't this so easy? You really just breeze through it. Applique is fun and easy. We have number 38, so arrow up, flip it over, and right in place right there. So cute. I love these flowers. They're featured in pretty much every block. Yeah, they're very cohesive. And then they're on your little gardener's hat. It's just adorable. I love it. If you love gardening, then this is kind of a must-have quilt, isn't it? And we've had a lot of comments that people are making it for their granddaughter or their daughter who's into gardening. So I love that. I love when we get to know that you're making the quilts for someone. I think a lot of us as quilters make a lot of quilts as gifts, don't you think? I love to do that. I don't do it as much as I maybe should. You would think, owning a quilt company, that everyone I know would have tons of quilts for me. But sometimes when you're doing it as a job, everything is for the job. So that's number 41. Now we're doing number 42. And with the leaves, remember they're not symmetrical. So do make sure you turn them the right way, because remember they have the accent lines drawn on them already. What am I doing? That's number 42. Get in there. I have it upside down, see? There we go. That was funny. I was talking about not putting it upside down, and then I was. And then number 43. Now we're on that final number 44, arrow up, make sure that it's connecting both pieces, right? So it's overlapped on our green, it's overlapped on our flower, and then we have our flower center. So now what we're gonna do is pick up these two units, and what we're gonna do is put our fabric now directly on top of our placement guide. So after we pull these up off our fusing mat, we don't need the fusing mat. So just gently peel these off, and they just kind of pop right off. And if something comes undone, don't worry, you can re-iron it. So here's one unit. Look how pretty that is. I gently lay that over here. And now this one, let it cool a little. You just simply don't want to burn your fingers. No need, right? And then it's just gonna lift right off. I do want to be careful down here. My leaves. There we go. And we have the second unit. So now, again, move your fusing mat. Keep your glass mat, because remember, you don't want to iron directly on top of your light pad. Get your background fabric, and we are going to put our pieces in place. Now, the background fabric that we give you is way bigger. See how it's going out way further than your trim line? Just keep it like that. No need to trim it yet. It makes life easy if you trim it at the end. So now, first up, we're gonna put our bird in place. And let's get our two cute little bumblebees, just like so. Oh my gosh, so cute. I love putting all the pieces in place. And then when you're stitching it, you really see it all start to pop and come to life. I love it. So we're gonna do just some gentle pressing right now, just for a few seconds on it. And then we'll move it to the Steady Betty after everything is in place. But we're gonna have some accent lines to draw first. So now we're gonna take unit 4 and put this little guy right in place. Now I just wiggled my fabric a little, If you want, you can take your tape, and I like to use medical tape. You can tape this just a little bit on your placement guide or on your glass mat for a second, and that way you don't have to worry about possibly wiggling it. That's a nice little tip, I think. So when this is in place all the way, I'm just gonna keep my fingers there and move my iron across. Again, I'm not pulling the iron, I'm lifting it across. And now our final unit. Just like so. And it does overlap right here. Get it into position. Beautiful. So you want to make sure that it's going over your stem, piece number 19, and over this little flower right here. And then we're going to give it a press. And if it's not 100% exact, don't worry. There's no quilt police allowed at Stitches of Love. There we go. So now let's talk about a few things. In your pattern, you're going to notice now that if you want to assemble your quilt top and use a long arm or your sewing machine to quilt the whole quilt together, then you're going to continue to the next step, number 13, and we're going to mark some accent lines. Or if you're going to use the quilt as you go method that we have included in here, you're going to jump to quilt to number 18. So if you are going to sew this with your sewing machine or a long arm at the end after the whole quilt top is pieced together, then you're going to do just regular quilting. All you're going to need to draw in this step is the little bird legs. You want to draw that directly on to your background fabric. There we go. And then you also want to give yourself a guideline for your bumblebee path, just like so. And now when you go to sew your applique, you're going to put a sulky Tear Easy stabilizer behind while you stitch. So let me continue to mark these little lines. If you are going to do the quilt as you go method, and you're going to jump to step number 18, what you're going to want to do is prepare a 7-inch piece of square of fusible batting. We have the Quilter's Dream 80/20 fusible batting. Highly recommend it. One side is fusible, one side is not. But what you're going to want to do, you're going to quilt it as you go. So you're not only going to stitch your applique and the accent lines and like the little French knot eyes, you're also going to quilt it. Now you can quilt this however you want. We gave you an outline of the exact quilting that is on the quilt as you see it in the pattern. So it's a really nice, simple meander because we figured if people were doing it quilt as you go, you wanted it to be a nice, quick quilting, and also it looks really cute. So all you're gonna do, if you're gonna do quilt as you go and you're skipping to step 18, you are going to outline this entire quilt line. And so what you're gonna do when you go to your sewing machine is actually trace this, and I like to use a white thread, and you're actually gonna quilt this block, and I'll show you a little bit of how you're gonna put your fusible batting on in just a second, okay? So for those of you that are not doing quilt as you go, you can turn the page and go to that stitch table, and it's gonna show you the order in which to stitch your applique. Again, you can stitch it in any order, but this is just a nice little cheater guide. So I'm just tracing. Now I'm using my Sew Line chalk pencil, and if you're not exactly perfect on the line, it's okay for the quilting. Quilting is forgiving, especially when it's a meander. Okay. So keep on tracing this. And then, let's see, we're halfway there. The tracing part takes a second. And let's see, I've wiggled just a little, so I'm gonna get myself back in place. There we go. And you don't wanna use a Pigma pin here because you're gonna be stitching with a white thread, unless you wanna use a contrasting thread, but I recommend a white thread. And it's gonna be hard to cover up. So this Sew Line chalk pencil is easy to cover up and rub away, so it won't be visible. I don't recommend a friction pin here because in a second we are going to put fusible batting on and we're gonna iron, right? So guess what? All the lines you would draw with your friction pin would disappear, and we don't want that to happen. And so I'm just tracing my quilting line all around. And you can see we come close to some of the quilting pieces, to the applique pieces. What's cool about this method too is that all the applique stitching serves as quilting. If any of you were in the Mugger Club back in the day, you know that we rarely needed to do quilting on them because all that applique stitching with that fusible batting in the background, it quilts it for you right then. All right, so almost done. Let's see if I'll speed up a little bit if I can. There we go. And again, like I just got off the curve a little there. Don't worry about it. It's a meander. There we go. Almost, you guys, almost. And then all we're gonna do in a second is simply put our fusible batting right underneath this, and I'll show you. It's gonna look a little funny before you quilt it because you're just gonna have this like funny line, right? But it really turns out so cool, and I'll go get my block where I did it in a second, and you'll be able to see it, and you'll be like, yeah, that's cool. I think it's cool. This is also a really great method to use if maybe you're introducing someone to applique and they want to, maybe they haven't invested in like bigger sewing machines that make it easier to do your own quilting, or they're not familiar with how a long arm process works. This is a really cool method for a beginner as well. It just, if you're introducing and sharing this project and getting someone, encouraging someone to join you. All right, so almost to the end of our line. And so it goes through our stitch path right up here. Almost, a little wiggle back. There we go. So now I'm going to give myself just a little guide. So make sure this is in place. I'm going to give myself a guide of my 7-inch line in the corner. And the reason I'm going to do that is it's going to help me line up my fusible batting. So just right here, because the way the quilt as you go process works, you don't want the batting to go into your seam allowance. So when you iron these two together, you are going to simply line those corners up, just like so. Look at that. Perfect. So see, I have my lines. Oh, let's see. This one's not quite perfect. Wiggle it just a little over your batting. There we go. See, now my 4 corners that are marked are lining up with my fusible batting. I'm going to give this just a little bit of a press. But what I'm going to do now is pull my Steady Betty back up. Let's turn that light pad off. And so now, when you're doing the quilt as you go method, the fusible batting under here, this functions as your stabilizer. So you don't need any stabilizer. The batting is your stabilizer. And it only takes a few seconds for this to adhere. So cool, right? And then of course on this step, if you want to use like your proper big iron, of course you can. I'm still using my little Steam Fast. So let's talk about just the stitch steps now. So no matter which method you're doing, these are the order you're going to stitch everything. And you can see optional at the bottom is the 1001 white for the quilting if you're doing the quilt as you go. And then let's talk about some of the stitch sizes. I am going to grab the block that I stitched and we'll review some little tips for going around all of your stitching. So you can see this is the block that I've already stitched. So let's talk about the stitch tips. Now, when it comes to the size of the buttonhole stitch, for the majority of the project, you can do a 2x2 or a 2.5 by 2.5. Look really good. And again, all machines are different on their buttonhole stitch. So play with the sizes, use the stitch guide to play with, and remember the sizes that you liked when you did your original little freebie Garden Wellies pin cushion. That'll guide you as well as some of the sizes that you want. I do want to point out a few spots where you want to be sure to take that size down. And that is, of course, on the little bird beak, you're going to want a much smaller stitch, maybe as far down to as like 1.5 or 1.8, because if you stick with that long bite in on that buttonhole stitch, your beak could almost disappear. Another part where you want to take your stitch down probably is on your green stems right here, because you don't want them to possibly like totally overlap and create like a zipper look. They can come really close, but you don't want them all the way overlapping. And again, on the little green stem up here, that's a really little piece of the green that shows, so just a few little bites in, and that's all you need. When it comes to your bumblebee, I would take the stitch size down for your entire bumblebee. If you're stitching the rest of it at a 2.5, come down to a 2. If you're doing a 2 everywhere else, come down to like a 1.5 or 1.6, 1.8, something like that down here. When it comes to the accent lines, like the little bird legs, the lines on all of the leaves, we used a nice, really thick stitch. Like on the embroidery machine, I used a triple stitch. If you're using your sewing machine, you can stitch over the line more than once, and that'll give it more depth. The look is up to you. And then with this down here, just do cute little bursts of stitching to get your bumblebee lines. And then you will use a French knot to make your 2 bumblebee eyes and your bird eyes. And you'll notice that you have a 1/4 inch all the way around this batting after it's trimmed. And this is going to be your seam allowance. So when you join at the end of the program, you start joining your blocks together, you're gonna have no batting in your seams. It's gonna lay so beautifully flat. You'll just love it. So it's very important that you, 1, cut your batting to the right size, and that you position it correctly and you trim your block correctly. So use your placement guide to guide you. So remember, you have your 7.5 inch trim line, and then that seam line and or the fusible batting line is at 7 inches. So very good to know. And again, you have all the information you need in your pattern. And if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We love answering your questions. I thank you so much for being a member of the Garden Moments Block of the Month. I hope you really enjoyed making this block today. What we're gonna make next month is going to be block 2. It's the cute little garden tools. So there's a lot of pieces in that. And how we're gonna do that is build out 2 main units and put it on. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. Then our 3rd month, we build almost the exact same block, but it's reversed. So it'll be very easy. And as we move through, your skills, if you're a beginner, are gonna be really good by the time you get to building your full gardener. She's really fun to build. And again, on something like this, that's large like that, is when you're really gonna love the technique that you have employed here, which is building applique units. So again, thank you for being a member of the Garden Moments Block of the Month. If you have any questions, we're happy to help. Reach out to us. We answer the same business day or the next day, depending on what time you email us. And happy stitching.